All right, well, as promised, she's joining me right now from her district in Michigan, I think. Actually, don't know what it is, but I'm so excited to talk to you. Senator Mallory McMorrow, welcome to Stand Up. Thank you so much. I'm so excited to ask you questions.
Pete, thanks for having me.
Yeah, you are a really interesting person, so I want to talk a little bit about you and then get to the amazing work that you're doing now in the Michigan Senate. But you grew up on the East Coast, but you somehow landed in Michigan, and now you're representing the 13th district in the Michigan State Legislature. And I don't know how old you are, but you're pretty young, it would seem. And so just tell me how you got there.
Sure. So I am the youngest woman who's ever been elected to the Senate in Michigan. I'm 35 now, but ran for office for the first time ever in 2018. I've lived in 5 other states, built most of my career in car design, toy design. I was a designer for Hot Wheels. I was the creative director for Gawker Media in New York. But my husband's originally from Michigan, and we moved back in 2014. So saw 2014 turn into 2015, turn into 2016 and the 2016 election. And Michigan feels like a microcosm of everything that was happening in the entire country. So I woke up the day after the 2016 election, looked outside, thought the world was going to be on fire. It wasn't, but felt like I had to do something. So I found the Women's March, went to the Women's March in Detroit, met a lot of people, networked, and just tried to figure out what the hell do we do next. And now I'm here.
When did you decide to run, and how did you win? Because I guess the things working against you are you're not from there. You didn't grow up. And if you're going against some guy who's got a road named after him, that's tough, or a guy. I don't know if being a woman in that district is an advantage. I'm guessing it's generally not. And then I guess that I say, yeah, you're young. So, and I don't know about your experience, but like just deciding to run and win your first campaign for Michigan State Senate. Like, how did you do that? A lot of people want to do what you did, and it's super hard.
Yeah, it is. So I Googled how to run for office, which is nuts. So that was step one, and found an organization called She Should Run, which had, a downloadable digital book about how to run for office. And then just started getting involved. I started hosting postcard writing parties and phone banking parties at my house with people just to call our representatives and elected officials and push them on issues. And it started growing. And eventually somebody said, have you ever thought about actually running? So I found an organization called Emerge America, which recruits and trains Democratic women on how to run for office. They had a chapter in Michigan. I applied. It was 6 months of every weekend meeting at a union hall and learning how to write a campaign plan and how to fundraise and, how to put a team together, and decided to go for it against a Republican incumbent in a Republican district that has never been represented by a Democrat. And nobody thought we could do it, even within my own party. The kind of running joke when I told people what I was doing was, you're going to get destroyed, but you'll build your name recognition and you can run for city council. So that was the attitude. So we had nothing to lose, and it just kept growing and growing. And then we started to see, what 2018 was looking like. And I started getting partnerships with groups like Sister District and some national organizations who said, okay, the suburbs outside of Detroit, that's going to be an area that's going to do some really interesting things. And it was led by women, a lot of women who ran for the first time, a lot of women who are pissed. And I'm the only person who beat an incumbent in 2018. And it cost $2.6 million between myself and my opponent. I
wanted to ask you about that because I got recruited to run for something. And I looked at running for something, and anybody who looks at running for something eventually comes up to, how much money? Where does the money come from? How do you get money? What's the money for? And what do I owe people who give me the money thing? As you know, and I'm sure we could talk about for hours, is a huge issue. But seeing as it's so broken, you have to play within those rules. You have to raise as much money as your competitor, or at least close to, so you can get the kind of attention. So how did you do it?
Totally. I mean, the crappy reality. Can we curse on here? I curse.
It's your reputation, Senator.
The shitty reality is that 80% of the time, the person with more money wins the election. And we need campaign finance reform because I quit my job to run for office full time for a year and a half. I was running a consultancy. I've never not had an income. I've been working since I was 12. And I wouldn't have been able to do it if my husband didn't tell me to go for it, and that you would regret if you didn't do it with every fiber of your being.
Hmm.
And I know that's not something a lot of people can do. I could, and I did. And asking for money sucks. There was nothing that makes you feel more vulnerable. You start with people you know, so it's like your friends, your family, people who love you, and will support you no matter what. But then I got into pulling a list of people I graduated college with, and I'm just cold calling them. And I got people who were like, "How did you get this number? Do I remember you? Like we might have met at a party once." And you're just asking them for money, and it is terrible, but it's just part of the grind, and you have to separate yourself. You're not asking money for you. Like, I'm not keeping this money, but this is what I'm doing. I'm giving up a lot of myself. There's a lot of change that needs to happen. So you're asking them to invest in that. You just happen to be the person has their name and picture on everything.
Let me just ask you about, since you've gotten elected, you talked about when you got elected and the timing of that, and the wave of the blue wave of feminism, if you will, the spark of the women's movement, the spark of Trump
Yeah.
actually winning the election after he did what he's done in his life to women. And I wonder, and you beat this Republican incumbent. And so I wonder what's happened in your district based on COVID, based on the economy, based on lockdowns and politics since you've taken that seat. I've done like a ton of prep on you. I see how hard you're actually working to contact your constituents, talking about all kinds of bills about bus drivers and the things that most people you're doing
Yeah.
the work. I don't know if they see you doing, like, how have attitudes changed as a result of the fact that the country has gone into chaos, specifically in Michigan, with everything. I read your piece about the Governor Whitmer kidnapping, something that you were there for. I mean, crazy stuff happening in Michigan. What's happened in the 13th district where you're the senator in terms of attitudes? Are you doing well?
Yeah. So Oakland County, I mean, I represent what is currently the wealthiest district in the state. It's just outside of Detroit, but it's a lot of higher income, very highly educated people. And it's that trend that we've seen around the country where, it used to be that college educated people aligned themselves with the Republican Party, and that's changing.
Hmm.
So I think a lot of that is still there, but Michigan is a dichotomy. Every time I talk to somebody from another state. We are a state that elected Gretchen Whitmer, Dana Nessel, who's an openly gay, badass attorney general, but we have more homegrown militia activity than any other state in the country, who come to our state capital with guns and threaten us. And it's horrifying. It's horrifying. And it is, how do you bridge that divide? And my hope is just being visible and talking to my constituents and saying what's up and being very honest. I mean, with what happened in Oxford, people are devastated that we haven't been able to do anything on this issue. So, I think that I'm in line with where my district is. But the reality is, there are people who want to wear you down and threaten your life and make it so hard to do your job that you quit.
What do you deal with? You've talked openly about this, so I don't mind asking you about it. And, you mentioned Gretchen Whitmer and the Attorney General, Dana Nessel. If you pay close attention to politics, you see something's going on in Michigan where you've got a lot of powerful women
Yeah.
in office, working in government. Jocelyn Benson is the Secretary of State. You're there now, gained a lot of notoriety. And so as much as, we cheer for that and we're excited to see that, you also know, and you also you don't want to talk about it. You're like, well, women in power means women receiving all kinds of threats. And I wondered if you could share kind of what you have to deal with on, hopefully not a regular basis, but I fear maybe.
It is. It's a very different kind of pressure. And we actually saw this even before I took office. So, I ran against an incumbent. I was in my early 30s when I ran, and the ads against me were all sexist and based on the fact that I'm a woman. So there was a huge, poster sized mailer that went out that had a picture of me that they had stolen from social media, sitting by a pool, drinking a cocktail, and it had a curling iron on it. And printed on the curling iron said, "Vote no on McMorrow." And it implied that, she's bringing California values to Michigan. And, I'm not from California originally. I worked there for a few years.
Do
But
you guys have pools, curling irons? In did they focus group that ad?
I want to be a fly on the wall.
California girl.
Yeah, because my biggest challenge in 2018 was name recognition. I've never run before. This was my thing, and that won me the election, that piece, because that turned into the Detroit Free Press wrote a whole story about how sexism's not dead, because all the attacks on my opponent from—
Wait, I didn't even think about that. Let me think of it differently.
Yeah.
Their attack ad was you in a bathing suit?
Yes.
So they're showing your body.
Yeah.
And that says this is not a senator or something. I don't know.
It implied like, don't vote for this silly girl, right? It was like somebody who drinks and sits by a pool and has a curling iron is not somebody who's a serious person, right? It was never about education, background. I ran a small business, like none of that. It was just, look at this girl drinking a margarita.
Did you ever, can we overthink this for 12 more hours? Did you ever think, who jumped in and was like, throw a curling iron in? Definitely put a curling iron in the picture.
So the funny thing about that, because people asked me about it, and I was like, well, if they had done any research at all, it would be a straightening iron because my hair is naturally curly. So.
That's funny. Okay, so let's get back to but the threats.
But the threats, yeah. So that set the tone, right? It's like if you're a woman in power, people are very threatened by that just because you're a woman. So, I talk to my male colleagues about this all the time. Like they get, aggressive emails and phone calls, but it's about their votes. And it's about, I'm not going to vote for you and you don't align with me. With us, it is rape threats. It's death threats that happen regularly. It is people calling me a bad mom. It is, my husband is Jewish, and I talked to somebody who called us and was pissed and said that, the governor is like Hitler. And I said, listen, you're allowed to express your frustrations, but we don't tolerate anti-Semitism in my office. And his response is, you are the exact type of person who killed your husband's family in the Holocaust. How do you respond to that? And we had it just this week. Somebody called our office and said, don't ever let me catch you in public because you're not going to make it.
What? Just going back to something you said, I don't want to gloss over. I want to actually know what you think. You said some people are threatened when women are in power. I don't know if you said in power in office, whatever you said.
Yeah.
I don't. Why do you think they are? How do you pose a threat as a woman to some people?
I think that, especially over the last few years, I think it has been revealed and accepted that there's still a traditional way of thinking where women are second, right? And I tried to sound this alarm when we had what I like to think, I don't like to think of it, but what was effectively the trial insurrection at our state capitol on April 30th of 2020, which was supposedly about frustration over COVID restrictions, but featured Barbie dolls hanging on nooses, Confederate flags, swastikas. It was all of these hateful images and imagery. And a lot of it is about, if it's a woman, she's a tyrant or she's a queen or she's just this language that you don't hear with men. Men, it's about what they do. Women, it's about who we are. And just, we're not supposed to be here. I had a woman in my district when I was running for office ask me, do you have any kids? When are you planning on having kids? How many kids are you planning on having? And then said, I can't vote for you because this isn't a job for a mom. You need to be able to have time to do the job. So it goes both ways.
Sounds like she's projecting, but let me try. Can I try and get your response?
Yeah.
I think it's everything you said, obviously, but what I see all the time, and I think a lot of it is obviously not even obvious to the person. It's not conscious. I don't want a woman to tell me what to do. I don't want anybody to tell me what to do. Is an attitude that a lot of Americans have, and we can talk about that, individuals and don't tell me what to do. I don't want the government to tell me what to do, and I definitely don't want a woman governor or person to tell me what to do. It's this kind of be subservient, or I'm in power, or gender role thing? How much of it is, I just don't want a woman telling me what to
It's
do?
this weird clapback. It's like, you're not my mom, right? You don't tell me what to do. I'm an adult now. You're not my mom. And it is so ingrained in certain people. And it is that visceral. And my male colleagues say, I don't get the same things that you do. I don't get rape threats and death threats and just hateful remarks on your body. For whatever reason, people regularly say, I'm a man. She must be transgender, which is like, I don't understand what level of hatred that is, but it happens all the time.
People regularly say that Mallory McMorrow is not a woman.
Yeah. And one
Where
of my staffers joked with me yesterday. She's like, well, they said that about Michelle Obama all the time. So you're in good company. I'm just, I can't, wrap my head around like, okay, well,
there's a psychological reason that someone does that, and I want to know what it is. But let me ask you though, getting back to the gun issue, which is certainly where you landed on my map, on the national map. You went viral, I think, at least last week with a floor speech you made, and I couldn't edit it out. I always do audio clips at the top of the podcast, but I couldn't edit one piece. It needed to be in its full context. I played the whole 4 minutes. I try to do that when I find something that's really powerful and that I don't press stop on myself. And tell us, a little bit about how your community is reacting to the shooting at Oxford High School, which is just outside your district. But as you told me right before I hit record, a lot of people that live in your district, work there. It's right there on the edge of your district. So it's basically part of your community. Yeah. I mean, take me through this shooting, your reaction to it, and kind of what brought you to this issue, which you've seen before. Obviously, you mentioned the guns at that protest brought you to this floor speech, and whether or not you think anything can be done. Sorry for asking a bunch, but just take that however you want.
No, yeah. It's horrifying. It was horrifying to get a text that was, first when we knew that there was a shooting at Oxford High School. And there's a sink in the pit of your stomach when it happens. And then the more that we learned about it, the worse it got. It's a 15-year-old with a gun, killed 4 other children. And it's a gun that his parents bought him. And this was a kid that literally cried for help. Dude drew a drawing that said, help me, the thoughts won't stop. And his parents refused to take him home. And, one of my colleagues, after I spoke on the floor, stood up in response to my speech and effectively accused me of not thinking before I speak and said, the families haven't even had time to mourn yet. How dare you? But that morning, the morning I gave the speech, a teacher who teaches at Oxford, who is my constituent, messaged me and said, my colleagues and I, we need to do something more productive than cry. This shouldn't have happened. She lost one of her kids and
students.
Yeah. One of her students. And that reaction, it's not, anytime you lose somebody, it's terrible. This wasn't a car accident. This wasn't, this was a school shooting. We have had school shootings for 22 years since Columbine. I participated in my first active shooter drill when I was in 7th grade after Columbine, and we haven't done anything. So one of my best friends growing up lost her older brother, somebody I knew, somebody I grew up with, in the Virginia Tech shooting, was killed. So I've already gone through what this does to your friends and your community and your families, and to have it happen again to more people that I care about. I was just pissed. And I think a lot of people are pissed. People directly in the community are pissed. And their immediate response was, yes, we're mourning, but we also need to do something.
So the do something is a really important issue. I've talked for years about this issue with activists and the presidents of, all of the major organizations, nonprofits working to create gun laws, regulations. And I think the problem happens with the fact that we haven't really had major national federal legislation. But as you know better than anybody, so much change can occur at the state level. And in states like Connecticut, where Sandy Hook was, and in states like my state in New York and California and other states, they do pass really important laws that make a huge difference. And I would argue save lives and keep guns out of people who would use them on themselves or others. And it makes a big difference, but people get so jaded because they don't see something get passed through our stupid U.S. Senate. But the concern then, of course, is even if you pass some important law at the state level, what happens when it gets challenged at the Supreme Court? This Supreme Court run by Clint Eastwood. So, I mean, what do you think can be done at the state level? How much of a difference does it actually make and satisfy activists who want to see change? And then do you get concerned about, even if you pass a law, it's going to get struck down by this Supreme Court?
Yeah, I mean, I think you brought up a point that I try to explain to people all the time. We all get caught up in national news and what is happening in Washington and what is happening in the Supreme Court. But the reality is, for people that align with my point of view, we've been paying attention to that for too long and ignoring what happens on the state level. And
which is why we're here. Sorry.
Which is exactly why we're here. Because on the state level is where you get the Texas abortion law, is where you get these laws. They get challenged and move their way up to the Supreme Court. They start at the state level. And also there was a coordinated effort to overturn the last election in the states, with state legislatures being pushed to appoint alternative electors, all these sorts of things. So what happens in the states is critical. Nothing happens on the federal level if it doesn't happen in the states. It starts here. And if we ignore it, that's where we end up. So we have to make it an issue, and it has to be a singular issue. We've told a lot of parents and people in Oxford, this needs to be your issue. Next time you go to the ballot, ask every single person running for every single office, are they going to take any steps at all for reasonable solutions to gun safety? Nothing we've proposed over the past years is, Democrats are coming to take your guns. It's safety measures. And we can't even get those across because, frankly, there isn't a lobbying arm with the power or influence that the NRA has had. And I got emails from Republicans this week, over the past week. Republican staffers who worked for, people in the legislature previously, who flat out said, thank you for what you said, because you're right. 80%, 90% of people agree on reasonable safety measures. The legislature is way off from where public opinion is, but people get to the polls and they're like, well, I want low taxes, and just forget about kids are murdering kids.
So I don't know Michigan politics well enough to understand how your state legislature works and majorities and vetoes and stuff. And you touched on it earlier, I do know Michigan well enough to know that there's Detroit and there's like Ann Arbor, in the college towns, and there's really then the rest of the state, which is less populated, more rural, and filled with what I would call terrorist training camps, militias everywhere. When it comes to guns, what are the politics in Michigan state that you can or cannot get, and the majorities, gun laws passed? Like, what are you up against? What's the score?
Yeah. So the legislature, particularly the Michigan Senate, has been Republican controlled since 1984.
Okay.
So when it comes to presidential elections, statewide elections, governor's races, we're a pretty reliably Democratic state, but it's the off years when we have legislature up, all these states, that we're split. So we've been divided government longer than I've been alive. And we haven't even been able to convince my Republican colleagues who are in charge to prohibit guns from being in our state capital, a place where fourth graders come on school trips every week. So we had, people bringing full tactical military training gear, on Gears of War cosplay or whatever it is they want to think they're doing, to threaten us, and they stood in our gallery, like quite literally, it's a fishbowl that I work in and I sit in, and people with guns stood above us and taunted us.
I saw the picture that you, I think, shared on social from that day. And I said, no, this can't be what she's describing, because you described we're in the well of the Senate and the photo is looking up and there were all these douchebags up armored. But you could describe it as a fishbowl. You're literally sitting ducks. How on earth can there be how on earth can you be allowed to go into the Michigan State House with a gun, much less the actual Senate with a gun? Like, how is that possible?
It's allowed. It's allowed. Not only is it allowed, our Senate Majority Leader that day went up into the gallery to have a meeting with them, and then took a meeting with them a few weeks later to help the militia groups work on their branding, because he has so much in common with them. And it came out, I'm like, They tried to kill us. And then the FBI revealed months later, they literally tried to kill us. They had a plan. They were meeting. They wanted to not only kidnap the governor and do God knows what, but the secondary plan was take over the Capitol and carry out public executions of us.
And just to be clear, the people that were there that day at that protest, this got confusing for me when I was preparing to talk to you.
Yeah.
That was separate than when they stormed the state house weeks later, I guess. And just to be clear, the senator isn't like saying two groups of the same people that were there on the protest. It was found out were later arrested.
Yeah.
They were arrested for the threats on your governor.
They were so they used the protests at our Capitol to recruit people.
Right. Unhallowed ground. Like, it's terrifying. It's just terrifying. And I think you've done a good job of kind of, describing as much as you can. I mean, most of it's chilling to hear you describe what you're hearing in terms of the threats and I mean, a lot of people would just quit and are quitting as a result of this. Yeah. Maybe you're just a young, naive woman, and maybe you should, you've got a child now. Maybe you've done your part, and maybe you should, do something else. Go back to your amazing other career that you had before this in design.
It's a hard thing to justify sometimes. I have people who love me and care about me and watch, whenever Michigan's on national news lately, it's usually not for good reason, unfortunately. And that's hard, but I keep coming back to, I had already given up my career to do this because of what I saw in 2016, because there was a video that went viral in my district of fifth graders chanting, "Build that wall," at another student because Donald Trump made that okay. And if we quit, who comes in to take our place? I mean, this is,
I think in Michigan, it's Magneto from the Marvel Cinema Universe. I mean, it's at this point, it's fictional characters. It's a Klan hood. It's a burning cross. It's a rifle. Like, it's not even a person. It's gotten so extreme and so scary that it is hard to know. And that's why someone like you in office, it sucks to have to say it, but it's like really brave that you just go to work every day. And I just hate that for you and your family and anybody else across the country who is serving, because it discourages super qualified, passionate, smart people from doing the job. I mean, you're seeing like nurses and doctors quit just because people won't get vaccinated. They're putting them in danger. It's brave people doing important work. They shouldn't have to be brave every day. You're not a firefighter.
No, and I've had, people push back on me because I talk about these things pretty publicly because I think it's important to say this is the reality. And, every now and then I get somebody who's like, well, that's part of the job. You should grow thicker skin. It shouldn't be part of the job. Like, this is supposed to work that regular people run and are elected in office. That's how our democracy is set up. It's supposed to be of the people, by the people, for the people, not, are you willing to deal with death threats on your life regularly? And you just need to grow thicker skin. So, my hope is that I talk about it not to complain or ask for pity, but to say this is the reality right now. And if it's not okay with you, you need to get involved and help us fix it.
I mean, it's saying you need to grow thicker skin. I'm sorry for what I'm about to say, but I'm not really. It's like, that's like saying, like, how the response is almost like, how thick does my skin have to be to prevent a bullet? Right. I mean, like, I don't want to have to wear a vest, and the idea that you're even using it in metaphor is so weak and stupid. Like, what are you talking about? You have
I was so careful with writing the speech that I wrote to give on the floor, and because you get into this fight over the Second Amendment is right and it shall not be infringed. But I was very careful to say, why are children's lives worth less than guns? Not your rights, guns, because we have seen record gun sales year after year after year after year. So it's not even, nobody is coming after your rights. It's not harder to get a gun and get a lot of them if you want to. But it's this decision, it's a policy decision that's been made that gun sales are more important than people's lives.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a new book about that written by, where is it? Written by a former gun executive. Yeah. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but
yeah, I just heard him on some podcast.
On the Daily Show. Maybe he's been on the show. Ryan Busey is his name.
Yeah.
But anyway, I mean, he's saying what you're saying. Did did the threats spike after you made this speech last week? Because as soon as you talk about guns and abortion, something changes in your mentions, and these are such volatile, but especially with guns, I think. Like, what changed, if anything?
So we were on high alert after that, and I have to give a lot of credit to our Senate sergeants, the people who kind of work, and they're much more attuned to these things. I think after we had April 30th in our Capitol, so I kind of gave them a heads up. I said, this is going to be something I'm going to be talking about. It's going to be a sensitive issue. We know anytime I say things like this, we get blowback. I was pleasantly surprised. I mean, have gotten a ton of feedback and response. It has been overwhelmingly positive.
That's awesome.
Which is great.
That's
Even
awesome.
from lifelong gun owners, Republicans, because I didn't stand up and say, we need to take all of your guns. I just said, we have to do something. Something.
Right. Do you think anything can get done through the legislature? Any law at this point, given the politics and given the makeup of the Senate?
In this current legislature, unfortunately, no. But I'm up for re-election next year, as is the Senate and the House, and we have new district lines. And
but just real quick, just take me inside the belly of the beast. Like, when you say unfortunately no, like, do you go over to your Republican Senate colleagues or anybody else and say, do you just be like, is there anything like background check, like anything at all? I'm not saying anything about. Is there anything we could do that we could agree on? Even, mental health funding. Do you do that? And what do they say?
Yeah. I mean, I am part of the Gun Violence Prevention Caucus, a group of us that get together, and it's a group that's existed since 2016 before I got into office. And I think we're the only state whose similar caucus has no Republican members. So we keep asking, please come talk to us. What do we want to do? Our Senate Majority Leader has agreed to give us a hearing on one of my bills, a package for red flag laws. He agreed to that 2.5 years ago. It didn't happen. He said that he's going to do it again. I don't put a lot of weight in it, but we have to hold his feet to the fire, right? I mean, because we need a hearing on something.
I know you have a 10-month-old, and we're talking on a Saturday. But I really, if you have like a few more minutes, I'd love to ask about a little bit.
For sure.
Less
do a
heavy.
Pivot to something that's not.
Yeah. I mean, it's been pretty heavy. The issues talking about the threats. And
I thought this was you're a stand-up comedian, right?
Yeah.
Really,
Let's lighten
up podcast.
Yeah. No, sorry. You worked for Hot Wheels. Isn't it a Matchbox company car?
Hot Wheels and Matchbox are both owned by Mattel. They design teams are down the hall from each other, and it is fascinating. So a kid who's a Hot Wheels kid and a kid who's a Matchbox kid are totally different types of kids.
Oh,
and they're designed differently. So the way that I always describe it, Hot Wheels.
Did I just step on a major cultural toy problem?
Yeah.
Wow.
So we do it all the time. So Matchbox kids love order. They're the types of kids who get the mat that has the cityscape on it, and they love like fire trucks and EMS, and they park them like in the parking spots, and they won't break the rules, right? Hot Wheels is loops, fire, toilets, sharks, chaos. They don't cross over. There's no crossover.
Wow. That's the current paradigm still, that with those toys? Or is that when, I was about to say when we were growing up, but you're much younger than me. But I remember we also, by the way, I don't know if you know about this, we had key cars. Are you familiar with these?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, of course you are. But I launched, it was, for those who might not be, there's a little key goes in the back of the toy car, a little tiny toy car, and you squeeze the key and the car goes flying. And I launched one at my brother and cut his head open.
God.
It was bad. I was like, oh my God, that surprised there's no lawsuits. But you worked in design. Like, you came from a whole nother world, and you can talk a lot about cars.
Oh, yeah.
And your husband, I think I read, I went deep. He was the editor-in-chief at one point of Jalopnik, which is all about cars, right?
Sure was.
And so you can talk all about cars. So I could talk about design forever. It's really fascinating, but I do want to ask you about EVs. You drive a Chevy Bolt. I think I beat you. I got a Chevy Volt in 2011. It's got 170,000 miles on it.
Oh, nice.
And it's my baby, and I'm going to have to let it go soon, I think. But talk to me about when will average folks, and maybe you think it's now, be able to afford an EV, even a hybrid? Because I still feel like even with a tax, it still feels like it's a little too much, $35,000, $40,000.
Yeah.
And where are we? You've got those manufacturers in your state, maybe even in your district. You know all about cars, jobs, organized labor. When do these EVs become more ubiquitous? I've been waiting for 10 years.
Yeah, so I think we hit the tipping point, and there's a lot of researchers that I've been talking to as well who back me up on this in the next 5-10 years. So this year, I am excited that we're finally hitting the tipping point where we're getting the types of vehicles that people want. So a Volt and a Bolt, it's a small car. I love it. I think it's super fun, but it's still kind of the early adopter. It's not a pickup truck. It's not an SUV, which is a lot of the types of vehicles that people like. But now you're going to be able to get a Ford F-150 Lightning that, if the power goes out in your house, your pickup truck can be a backup generator and power your house, which is awesome. And
Wow,
so
I never thought of that. Yeah.
very cool. And now we're going to see, once those hit the market, which is happening now, we're going to see those vehicles come onto the used car market and the price is going to come down. So next 5 years, I'm super excited about, because that's where we're going to get mass adoption, because it's the things people want and the prices are going to be a lot more affordable.
Yeah, that's really what I'm wondering about, is the timeline. What about the infrastructure bill and this idea of, what's it called, range anxiety, and now having there be actual infrastructure of plug-in stations the way there are gas stations? Like, where do you see that, and what are the obstacles?
Yeah, so Michigan's a good example. The average driver in Michigan drives less than 14 miles per day. So, most people commute to work, maybe go to the grocery store, come back. So there's sort of the disconnect between the idea that I'm going on a road trip every day from Detroit, like way up into the Upper Peninsula, versus kind of my daily driving. So for most people, it's going to be like charging your cell phone. You come home, you plug it in. Whenever you're not using it, you're good to go again. But we do need that public charging infrastructure. I think it's going to be less like the gas station model, but more you're going to be able to charge at home and charge at work. And then we're going to need, probably the fast chargers in the middle for your ability to go on that road trip when you do need to go on it. So that's been something that I'm working on, is how do we have the right infrastructure in the right places? How do we make sure we're incentivizing or encouraging like owners of apartment buildings to put chargers in? So if I don't own a garage, I still have a charger. And that's ticking up as well. And we have the infrastructure bill on the federal level that has a bunch of money for chargers in it too. So that's going to be great for all of us to help get those out there.
I could talk to you for hours. I have a million more questions. There's so much that you can talk about. I hope we can talk again. But final question: you wrote an interesting piece for Crain's Detroit. Did you write this? Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. It's titled McMorrow and Wirt, your husband's last name, Wirt. Raising kids or having a career doesn't have to be a binary choice for women. Here's how to change that. You're really the perfect person to ask this to. You obviously have thought a lot about it. You're living it. Like we said, you had a baby under a year ago during the pandemic. Talk that story for another time. But the idea is, now that a lot of people think about, well, we can't even afford to have another kid because preschool is more than our mortgage. Forget about people living at even the lower end of the socioeconomic scale. You're in a unique place to talk about the policies that can make it easier for families to say, we can do this, we can afford this, we can have a decent standard. And then also, how do you have it all? That's a question that women have been arguing about and being told what to think for generations, because, it's either stay at home mom, right, or go to work all the time, or some kind of you can have it all. And it's just kind of a stupid phrase, have it all.
I know. Yeah, I do. I appreciate the pushback on sort of the lean in mentality for women, which is just like insert yourself and do it all the time. But women are like, I'm burned out. I can't do mom 100% of the time and work.
Not everybody can do that.
Like, you can't. So childcare is a unique space that the market isn't going to solve. And the reason is most of the people who need childcare, paid childcare, are middle class, versus the folks that are higher income, either have a nanny, aren't working, all that kind of stuff. So you're not going to get this place where people are willing to pay more for their service because they can't. Like there's a finite kind of group of people who are
Right.
the customers.
Right.
And the fact that we have childcare providers who can't afford childcare themselves, it's an issue. So in government, we incentivize a lot of things. Elon Musk and his companies have received billions of dollars in tax incentives, investment for Tesla, SpaceX. I'm not arguing that those aren't good things, but it's a choice that we make as policymakers. And I think we need to incentivize and invest in childcare as well, because otherwise it's never going to work. And if we do, you unlock potentially millions of qualified, passionate women to be able to come back to work, especially right now, because even women who are working or have been in the workforce have just decided it's too chaotic right now because I never know when my kid's school is going to close again, if there's an outbreak or a school shooting or, any of these kinds of things. So people are just choosing to stay home because it's impossible. So that's my hope, is that we change the conversation that childcare is economic development. If we want to grow the economy, we've got to pay for childcare for everybody.
I wonder if you've thought about this, but as you're talking, and I promise I'll let you go, it was like, I'm always trying to think about how to convince people of a policy argument. And we're so divided and the conversation becomes so short, but it's like, it truly is. If you're anti-immigrant or even, let's say, white supremacist, like a real racist, like you want this policy because white middle class, upper middle class people aren't having kids because they can't afford them. And so if you're conservative and anti-immigrant, it's not stopping people, immigrants or necessarily as much from having kids, much less people that don't have as much money, because people have kids. But like when people are thinking about it, it's the white people. I wonder if there's any truth to the demographics of, if you encourage this policy, childcare, you're going to have more people that
Totally. Well, and you just look at the census data. This is the first time in U.S. history that the white population is declining and minority groups are growing in population. And I think that's scaring a lot of people. I think it's exciting because I like meeting people who are different than me. And I think we're a melting pot, and that's a good thing. But you are exactly right. I talk to people who say, some of my colleagues are like, why is the birth rate so low? Why aren't women having kids? They can't afford it. Women want to go to work, which is something, Republicans always promote is, you have to get a job, you have to go to work. Women want to go to work, but they can't do both. So they're just choosing one or the other. And that was the whole point of my article. The choice is being made, and we need to make it so your choice can be both.
Yeah, you could get a college degree and you could be making $80,000, $100,000, but if you're paying $20,000 or $30,000 for childcare, you're not making that much. It's not worth it.
I ran into a woman down the street who's got 2 kids, and it was right after I came back to work. I was pushing, my baby in a stroller, and she stopped me to say, number one, I just appreciate you being really candid about taking leave and what that was like and kind of the pushback you got. But also she was like, I kept my job solely because I needed the healthcare. Because by the time I was paying for 2 kids to be in daycare, I made nothing. Like it was a net even. I broke even. So I was effectively paying for the privilege to go to work.
Yeah.
Which when you think about it, like I'm paying to go to work, not getting paid, just so they can have healthcare. Like, what are we doing?
That's another great point about the healthcare thing. Yes, that's a great point. And by the way, why I in the end didn't run for office, because I had lost the corporate gig that I'd had for 15 years, which was awesome, and had great health insurance. And my wife, I kept talking about running for office for 3 weeks. My wife finally takes me aside and goes, "Wait, I don't have health insurance. You run for office. We won't have health," And luckily, on the individual market, because of Obamacare, it's subsidized and we can afford it now, as we build our businesses. But like, you can't make so many choices. And I'm a man who is super successful, and I couldn't run for office, this dude right here, because I didn't have health insurance. Like, it was a realistic concern, and it prevented me, who is way more qualified than others. But anyway,
a lot of people, anytime somebody tells me they're not qualified to run for office, I'm like, just come to my workplace for one day. Just come. Just see it.
Yeah, seriously. Well, Mondaire Jones won, so in the end, we're okay. I love talking to you. I'm super impressed with your work, and I can't imagine whatever the future holds is going to be amazing. And I'm so glad that you're on the job there in the 13th district. Great to talk to you. I'll plug everything, all your work, and please come back and talk to us again, or maybe even join one of our live events to take questions. I'll keep promoting the great work you're doing. Thank you.
Thank you, Pete. Appreciate it.